What's up, guys? Dr. Mo here, digital nomad physician at digitalnomadphysician.com. All right, so let's get started. This is going to be a lengthy episode. It's all about Iran. It's about traveling in Iran. It's about our experience in Iran, traveling as a couple in Iran, everything from money, finance, buses, accommodation, flights, getting into the country, leaving the country. So I'll take you through all that and downloading apps and VPN and all the other fun stuff. So it's really great for people who are already Iranian citizens, so they have passports and they want to go back and they've mostly lived in the US or abroad, but it should apply to everybody else who's planning on traveling to Iran. All right, so I wanted to kind of start out with the whole, just flights, like getting in, right? So fairly straightforward. You can book it ahead of time. You can have a travel agency book it for you. We just did it ourselves. We took Emirates, and it was very nice airline. And to go from LAX and stop in Dubai and then get to Tehran was actually very painless. And getting Uber to go to the airport at LAX and then getting a taxi to come from the airport to our apartment here in Tehran was very painless. So I think that piece is not very different from other countries. The piece that's a little bit complicated is when you first get in, like how do you arrange stuff? I really recommend talking to some Iranian friends, and they all know people, and there's always somebody you can arrange to pick you up from the airport, somebody dependable with a good car. This theme will repeat many times. Tehran specifically, and many of the big cities, even Tabriz, there's a lot of air pollution. The smell on the streets is atrocious from the car exhaust. So if you're in a crappy car, especially if you're in a crappy car where the exhaust is leaking and it's coming into the car, or the gasoline is just leaking, that's very normal. There's a lot of low quality cars here. Even though the gas itself is fairly well refined, even though I used to think it's not well refined, the cars themselves don't have like really good catalytic converters and other stuffs, and so the air pollution is terrible. So for that reason, try to get a good quality car. So there's like the better Peugeots, and then there's all the imports such as Hyundai, Kia, and Toyota. If you can get into those, that's great. It's not gonna happen a lot. Those cars are incredibly rare and expensive, and most of the taxis are going to be kind of your traditional, I think it's either Pride or something like that. It's some sort of a traditional, usually white car, or even the yellow taxi type cars. But if your friends know someone who has a nice car, they'll close the windows, they'll turn on the air conditioning. You're not going to smell much from the outside. It's really pleasant. So that's the piece that I think is worth considering. The airport is about an hour away. So depending on the time that you arrive, from fairly early on, from 9 a.m., 10 a.m. until about 2 p.m., you have a window where there's not a lot of traffic. After 2 p.m., it's an insane amount of traffic in Tehran, much worse than what you think of in LA or even New York. And so consider that, because you're just driving from the airport to your Tehran destination might be a nightmare. And forget getting on the train during those peak times. It just won't happen. The train is packed and people don't even fit. And if you have a lot of luggage, it's kind of tough. So with that said, let's jump into the next piece for me, which was kind of difficult to figure out, is money, how to pay for stuff. None of your credit cards are going to work. None of your ATM cards are going to work. The banking system here is closed. And so I was able to get a blue card, BLU card, which is from Saman Bank. And because I'm a citizen here, I was able to do everything online. But you do need a few things, like you do need a phone number that's registered to your name. You need an address. It doesn't have to be registered to your name, but you need an address where the card can be shipped with somebody who's going to call you to the door and come and sign something. And the address piece is important because you also got to put in the address, and that's a nightmare. Just the way they write the address here is very different. They write the main street to the smallest street to the final street, and then they write the apartment unit number and then the apartment floor. So everything's a little bit more complicated. For those of us who live in the US, to put in that address is a nightmare. And then you need a postal code usually. There's a postal code that you have to put in. But all that said, I had to just read something in Farsi with a video in order to obtain that card. Once I got the card, I was able to have somebody transfer money into that account for me. The way that works is you give somebody who has both dollars and tomans. There's always somebody like that. And, you give them $1,000. They put whatever that is, 600 million toman. They transfer it, it's what's called card to card, into your account. And the nice thing about once you have the app and once you have the ATM card, you can just pay people on the fly. Everybody has a card. You can't live without a card here, except if you're illegal, like a lot of the Afghanis, unfortunately, may not have that, but they might have card terminals that you can give them. So you can just give somebody card to card. So let's say I take a car and to go somewhere and I have to pay them like, I don't know, $2 or 120,000 toman. Then I just say, hey, what's your card number? I open my app, I put in their card number, their name comes up. There's a kind of a central database for that. I transfer the money, it immediately pings their phone, says, hey, you paid, and it said you're on your way. So the ATM card is really nice to have. Second option, you ask somebody for the ATM card. Now, if you're gonna, talking about prices and everything, if you're gonna buy stuff, especially if your Farsi is not that good, it's a good idea to have a local person call ahead or call and ask about the price of something. Because if you're a foreigner, a gringo, you're gonna get a very high price. And it's not about 50-50. 50% of the time, everything's labeled, the price is right there, there's some room for negotiation. 50% of the time, there's no price, and so you might get gypped. Speaking of that, when you buy something, negotiating, saying, oh, I'll give you cash, there's no such thing. There's very little cash being used here. It's good to have some cash to tip someone, but tipping is not really a thing. You might want to give it to, I don't know, somebody, but maybe a musician or somebody on the street. But for the most part, there's just the need for cash is very low, except when you take taxi. In that sense, it's good to have it. So the taxi system is complicated here. And we'll get into that when we get closer to the transportation part. And like I said, don't worry about tips. Now, you're gonna hear some weird stuff if you're a foreigner about money, right? So a lot of people are gonna say, oh, you're American, you can afford this. So for example, let's say I wanna buy, you need a phone here, or you want to buy some art piece, and somebody says, well, for you, it's nothing. So I'll give you an example. I bought this beautiful mug that I bought for about, I want to say $6 US. So about 360 toman. And I was looking at it and I was like, oh, it's kind of cool. And like the price was a little bit high. For the local stuff that you buy, the arts stuff that you buy. And I went to the lady and I was like, hey, I really like this. What else do you have? It's a little bit more expensive. And they can tell immediately, even though من فارسی که حرف میزنم یکم بعضی از لغت‌ها رو خوب نمیتونم استفاده کنم. So بیشتر آدما میفهمن که من ایرانی نیستم که اینجا زندگی میکنم، من خارجی هستم. So I basically said that I have a bit of an accent, and so people can tell. And so she's like, "Oh, it's nothing for you. You live abroad." And so it's pretty good to just say, "No, but it's okay. I still would rather pay like a fair price. I don't, it's still expensive for me." You could say stuff like that, And so if somebody says that, just have a good way to kind of continue the conversation with them, because it's totally not true, right? If somebody wants to sell me like, let's say, headphones for $80 US. I'm like, that's $80 US. And they're like, oh, it's nothing for you. I'm like, that's a lot for me, man. Like, what are you talking about? So take that with a grain of salt when somebody says something like that. And they usually don't mean it as something negative. Don't get into arguments. People are very good in Iran diffusing bad situations. So it's a great skill to develop. Highly recommend developing that skill. So let's dive into finding accommodations. Okay, so there are a couple of good apps that you can use. I recommend word of mouth again, because people are going to recommend some awesome stuff. If you're planning on moving around Iran, hostels are great, especially if they have good Google reviews or TripAdvisor. I would say people use a little bit more TripAdvisor than Google. Google Maps is fairly ineffective for finding local stuff. You can find some stuff, but not everything. A lot of businesses aren't listed. Insta, they call it Insta, or Instagram is pretty good for finding local stuff, really good for artisanal cafes and those kind of things. But if you're going to find accommodations, my go-to things are either boutique hotel, what's called boomgard, so hotel boutique, ya boomgardi, or which is boomgardi is basically an eco lodge, so usually kind of like a larger piece of land with multiple units on it, very simple, very basic. It's going to have heat, it's going to sometimes have AC. You'll have a toilet, usually like the Persian toilet, and it'll have some stuff for you to sleep in. Sometimes you have to have your own sheets. Usually you have to have your own sheets for eco lodges. For boutique hotels, the nice thing is they're not very strict as regular hotels, especially when it comes to documentation. For example, I travel with my wife, but we're married here in Iran, but we're not married in the US. And so we had to fix that. We had to go get what's called Nomad, which is basically a temporary marriage that you can do here for people, I don't know if it's religious or if it's what, but you can do that. I paid about $30, $50, something like that to get a temporary marriage certificate so that we could travel together. And it's just a simple piece of paper. The boutique hotels are not as strict about that, but they're still going to require it. Some are going to say, well, if you just have foreign documents, foreign passports, it's fine. They don't care if you stay in the same room. But some do. Some really do. In fact, we went the regular hotels. So there's the regular hotels, there's the boutique hotel, there's the boomgad, and then there's the last one is actually you can just rent a room. So if you go to a village or some other place, they'll say, room for rent. Just that's it. It says room for rent, and there's a lot of room for negotiation. So don't get ripped off. Usually the hotel and the boutique hotel are the ones who are going to ask you for documentation. So you're going to have to show as a couple that you are, married or something. There are government offices where you can go and, just get a marriage certificate. That's not very, very difficult. But for the women, I do advise you to be cautious if you are an Iranian woman who might come and go out of Iran. The temporary marriage is usually fine. You're not going to have any issues. But if you do get full, legit marriage where it's going to be on your documents, you're going to need some permissions from your husband to get in and out of the country and do a bunch of other stuff. So do talk to somebody who knows what they're talking about. We didn't particularly enjoy the room rentals. We really loved the eco lodges. We love the boutique hotels, man. Those were just some of the most breathtaking places we spent time in. And they were really worth it because they also have like a cafe on site. Usually a local person owns it, so you get to talk to them, you meet their friends. I mean, we made such great friends from just being at an eco lodge. In fact, the last one we were in was in Isfahan. So we worked our way from Tehran north, and then we went to Tabriz, and then we went down to the Kurdish area, and then we worked our way all the way down, and then of course the Iran conflict started, so we were kind of trying to figure out where to go from there. And the place we stayed in Isfahan was a boutique hotel. And the thing about it was this gorgeous kitchen where everybody got together and stayed. There's a couple of Russians that were staying there. And then the family of the owner was there. They told us everything. We went out with them. We had a bunch of like coffee, tea, and like breakfast, lunch. So it was just such a great experience. It felt like being, with your family. So that was really great. Prices wise, there's no way for me to give you pricing ideas because it changes so much, but you can find a hotel here that's very much Americanized or Europeanized for $200, $300 a night. And then most nice hotels are probably going to set you back about $60 to $80 a night. And then the boutique hotels are going to be somewhere around $30 to $40 a night. Some of them will be about $50 a night. And so $1 is right now is about 60,000 Toman. It's actually went up a little bit to 63,000, I think, with the whole conflict. And then a boomgard you might find for about $8, $5, $10 a night. A room rental, again, we got, I want to say ripped off, but we didn't really get ripped off. We just didn't know the prices when we first booked it. In fact, one of the tour guide who was taken, not a tour guide, this guy we met who's like, hey man, I'll just come with you guys and you pay me for the day and I'll just take you everywhere. Awesome, lovely guy, Farshad. We're still friends with him. He's like, why did you call? Let me call. If I call, you're going to get a much cheaper price. And those you can get for about, $3-4 a night very easily. If it's peak season, of course, understand you're going to have to pay more. There are certain villages where you're not even going to find a room, guys. You're not even going to find a cafe that's open. Iranians are very much about travel and doing stuff. They don't, it doesn't matter what the fuck's going on, bombs and this and politics. They'll travel, they'll do their thing. So definitely understand that you're going to, if it's peak season, you're not going to find much, and prices are going to be a lot more. Always call ahead to any place you're going to go and ask what time is check-in, what time is check-out. Do you have a heater? Do you have AC? Do you have running water? Do you have a toilet? Does the toilet have a shower? Is the toilet en suite or off suite? Basically, whatever you're thinking and you want, be sure to ask. As far as Wi-Fi, nope. Almost none of the places we stayed at had Wi-Fi. Not the big hotels, not the boutique hotels, none of them had internet. If they had internet, if they had Wi-Fi, it was garbage, it didn't work or something like that. This is not this is not to say all of them are like that. You're gonna find really nice hotels. You're gonna find boutique hotels that definitely have Wi-Fi. Just don't depend on it. Fortunately, we'll get to that. The phone thing, the SIM card thing is not that complicated. In fact, on my list, that's the next thing we're going to talk about. So I think I covered everything with hotels and accommodation. You can certainly just knock on people's door and say, hey, do you have an extra room? It might seem odd to you. It's not very odd. Of course, the place you do it, the time you do it, and the way you appear certainly are going to make a difference. But yeah, this is a very different country than what I think we're used to in the US. All right, so the next thing is your phone and SIM cards. Buying a SIM card is very easy. You do need obviously a passport or something like that. Now there are SIM cards that they'll sell to foreigners, so you can definitely do that. But for somebody with an Iranian passport, you need your shenasname. You don't need your passport, and you need your carte milli. Now, if you don't have your carte milli, you can get the number, but you do have to go apply for it. And for those of you who haven't been here for a long time, the carte milli is relatively new. For many years it wasn't there. So you have to go at least apply for it. It's not that difficult to go apply for it. You go into government office, you give them a bunch of info. If you can't read or write Farsi, take someone with you who can, because they're not going to be that nice to you. Because you got to fill out an application. You need to go with an address, you need to go with a phone number and all that stuff. But then once you go apply for it, it'll make your life easier because you can use this to then get a SIM card. Now, there are several different SIM companies. There is Irancell, there is Ritel, there is Hamiti or something like that. I don't remember the name. I have Irancell. It worked perfect everywhere we went. Someone's like, oh no, you definitely need Ritel, it's not gonna work. Look, you can get a dual SIM phone and you can put both in. If you're here in Iran for more than 30 days, your phone will deactivate. So this phone has two SIMs. It has a eSIM and a physical SIM. There's no eSIM in Iran. There is no eSIM in Iran. There's only physical SIM cards that you have to put into stuff. And so one option is for you to travel with a personal portable mobile Wi-Fi. We found that to be very ineffective, very inefficient. It doesn't work. The range sucks. Takes a long time for it to reset. Absolutely terrible, bad investment that I made. And I just travel with two phones now. Why? Because I couldn't register my phone, even though when you land at the airport, when you bring in a phone, you can register it, meaning you can register the SIM slot. If you have two SIM slots, you need to register both. You can register it at the airport, and then later you can log in on a website and pay the gomrok, which is the taxes on importing a phone. So for this phone, which is a Fairphone 4, it's currently valued at 600 or 700 euros because it's only in Europe. It's about a $200 fine that I had, tax that I had to pay on it if I wanted to register it, but I couldn't even register it. So the alternative option is to just buy like a Samsung A15, which is going to set you back about $80 to $100, and it's going to be fine, but you buy it here in Iran, and then you can use the dual SIM aspect of it, and all your headaches are gone as far as needing a phone that's registered, because After 30 days, the phone just turns off because the SIM card can read your IMEI number. And if the IMEI is not registered within 30 days, then it'll just turn off the phone. It says this SIM will not work on this phone, and no SIM you put in there will work. I know it's complicated a little bit, but just so you know, internet connection is fine. It's fine. Internet is so cheap here. It's like, for us, it's like ridiculous. I can buy a 15 gig package for, here, let me do the math. I think about $3. It could be about $2. That's 15 gigs. And you might go through that really fast, especially if you're, want to watch videos and stuff like that, but it hasn't been an issue. I have Netflix. This is a Chromebook, so it's really nice because I can have the Netflix app on here so I can watch and download some movies. I have YouTube, so I can download YouTube videos on it. And so that part is pretty good. The reason I said dual SIM is because some people will put Ritel and then an Iran-Cell SIM, so two different SIMs on the same phone. That way you can sort of have really good internet connection everywhere you go. We didn't have a lot of issues, and we traveled a lot. Like, we took cars and buses and everything everywhere. Used phones are not that cheap. I've been trying to buy a used phone on an app called Divar, and they're not cheap. So it's like you might as well just buy new. And the reason is everything can get repaired here. So when somebody buys something, it's unlikely for them to toss it. Everything gets repaired here. This fucking lid, if this breaks, even if it doesn't have a screw, they will fix this. I can't even explain to you the things they fix here. Glass, plastic, anything on this guy that breaks, if they can get the part, they will fix it. If they can't get the part, they will fucking Frankenstein it together. It's so impressive, I can't even tell you. So, moving on. Let's talk about taxis and some local transportation. It's very cheap. Gas is very cheap. You can get, I don't know how many liters you can get for like 1,500 toman, which is a few cents, but you can fill a whole tank up for like $1, essentially. Think of it that way. So because gas is cheap, cars are cheap. And because people's time is not well reimbursed, it's also cheap. You can use an app called Snap, S-N-A-P-P, which you have to download off of the Google Drive, off of the Google Play Store if you have, God help you if you have iPhone, but I just use Android. I don't know how iPhone, my girlfriend, I think, has an iPhone, and she's been doing fine, but it's been much easier with Android. Everybody here is Android that I meet. And so you can download the Snap, but it is off a different website. So your phone's going to give you a warning. Are you sure you want to download this? And then a lot of times you're just going to struggle with VPNs, which we'll get into because you got to turn it off for one app and turn it back on for another app. So with Snap, I can order a car to come pick me up at a certain location and drop me off at a certain location. You can even use Snap to order a car, just like Uber or Lyft, to take you from one city to another. The reason I don't recommend it is because the cars are really, really low quality cars. And believe me, you don't want to be 3 hours in a car where all you smell is exhaust, or the heater is off, or the guy is just a dick. Not a dick, but like just, he ain't playing ball. He'll blast the music, he'll turn it down, he'll start a cigarette and stuff. It's different. I mean, they're really nice if you tell them not to, but come on. So if you take a Snap, if it's really, really busy time in Tehran, I recommend that you just pick your starting destination at a major intersection and ending destination at a major intersection. Otherwise, they're not going to come. It costs like $1 to go a long distance. So imagine for every $15 you spend in the US, it will cost about $1 here. So if you go a long distance and it might cost you like $100 in the US, it's probably going to cost you, I don't know, maybe $5, $3, something like that. It's very, very cheap to travel here by Snap. You can also use Snap to deliver and pick up stuff. We do that all the time. Nilu's family lives like 30-minute walk from here, but like we left something over there, so we get what's called a Snap box. It's a motorcycle, super cheap. They go pick that item up and bring it for you. They can pick stuff up from the grocery store, pharmacy, drugstore, everything. So Snap is a pretty good one to have. There is Maxim, which is great for intercity because you can choose the car. For example, you go on the Maxim website and you say, I want to go from here to Tabriz. And it says like, I don't know how many hours it is, 8 hours, 6 hours. And it'll tell you how much it costs. For about a 3-hour ride, for about a 6-hour ride, we usually pay 3 million toman or so. So, not that expensive at all. Like, was it $30? No. Anyway, it's not that expensive. And I mean, it's great. It's great because you get a really nice car. You can pick the car. So once you do the booking, it'll say, okay, this guy has a 2.4 review and has this kind of car. No, next one. This guy has a 4.5 review and has this car. Okay, great, I'll take that guy. And then you guys arrange the pickup point and destinations and stuff like that. They usually bring tea and some snacks on the car. The drivers are really sweet. They're really nice, the Maxim drivers. Then there's the yellow taxis you can pick up at one intersection, and it'll just go straight and drop you off at the next intersection. It's only like 10 toman, which is very little. 10 toman means 10,000 toman. Every time I say 10, sorry, I meant 10,000. So here, that's the way they talk. They'll say, oh, that thing's only 3 toman. And they're referring to the portable keyboard, which is 3 million toman, but they'll say 3 toman. Or they say, oh, the water bottle was only 15, but they mean only 15,000 toman. Or like this art piece was this mug was 150 toman, but they mean 150,000 toman. So it's kind of interesting, like how they mix that up. That's really for transportation. The bus is tough because both times that we took a bus for 6 hours, it's very easy to arrange. We go to alibaba.ir. You can also do it on Safar 724 or something like that. And you can ask around for the most up-to-date websites that people use. But the thing was, like, they had the bus was super hot. They wouldn't turn on the AC because the bus driver is sitting there and smoking a cigarette. Both times, the bus driver was smoking a cigarette inside this closed bus. That was super hot. It was a nightmare. For us, it was a nightmare. I couldn't do it. I had such a hard time, guys. So I haven't taken a bus since. Everybody here tells me, no, that doesn't happen. It happened to us twice. So we're like, hey, let's just not do that. Let's just get what's called an enclosed car. Enclosed car is basically when you do Maxim or Snap. So don't forget, if you're going to download an app, you do have to turn off your VPN. I did mention that. So the VPN thing is something you need to download before you get to the country. That's one problem we encountered is my girlfriend didn't download a VPN on her laptop, and every website we'd go to download a VPN required us to not be in Iran. And so it was really, really difficult. People here locally can help you, and they can put it on your computer and stuff like that. But again, you're giving your computer to a random stranger. And so I think that's, you got to be okay with that. Same with your phone. So I downloaded 3 different VPNs before I left. And actually, none of them worked except for ExpressVPN. I'm not sponsored by anyone. I don't give a shit. I did NordVPN, Express, and shoot, what's the other one that I have on my phone? On my laptop and my phone. I don't see it right now, but only Express worked for me. And even then, Express is very finicky. A few things didn't work. It would work every once in a while. And then I had to figure some settings out. They're pretty good with their customer service, so that I didn't have any trouble. I finally got the right setting, and now I know the 3 places that I can connect to. And that's been okay. But sometimes, for example, I'll go to a place and connect to a friend's Wi-Fi, and then my VPN won't connect. And so I have to pick a different city or country or something like that. So those are some of the headaches you have to deal with. Let's talk a little bit about culture. This is fun to me. So talking politics is out of the question. A lot of people do it. It's really, to me, is like a really bad idea. This is a very strong political country with a top-down approach. And so your opinion is can be dangerous, right? And so even what you talk about and discuss. So a lot of foreigners from Turkey and America, well, actually we didn't say any American, sorry, Turkey, UK, Norway, Sweden, they would come and we'd be at a hostel or we'd meet them somewhere and we start talking. They immediately start talking politics. And I just don't feel comfortable, especially my name is Mohammed, I'm an Iranian, dual citizen with the US. I just don't want to get in trouble. So I would just sort of say, I don't know much about politics. I don't really want to discuss it. And that was pretty good. Some of the locals want to discuss politics. Some of the taxi drivers want to tell you, and Snap drivers want to tell you about how great or bad the country is, how great or bad the regime is, all that stuff. I just basically say, yeah, cool. I don't know. I'll just change the topic. And for the most part, they understand. But I would be cautious. And it's very easy to get caught into a political discussion because everything can be political. The hijab the women wear, the cell phone internet access you have, the cost of bread, the wages, everything can then all of a sudden turn political. So I've kind of been cautious of that. Talking to women, very easy. You can walk up to any woman, have a conversation just like a guy. So in that sense, I don't think I would be too worried. Even before I came here, I thought like, oh, you couldn't even shake hands and do that stuff. Apparently you can't really shake hands, but a lot of women will be like, hey, let's shake hands. So they'll do the dos besos, which the Spanish people do, especially once you're friends, they'll do the hug and stuff like that. So again, just proceed cautiously and things. Sometimes a woman won't get into an elevator if it's just a man. So that's happened to me a couple of times. So that's something to consider. Like you can go into a taxi that you can share with somebody else and the woman will sit right next to you. So those things are also there. Again, just one of those things to figure out. Rudarvaisi and Tarofi are the common cultural things here where you go to pay with your card and somebody says, that's my blue card, for example. And they're like, oh, no, don't worry about it, man. Like, it's on me. They don't mean that. So don't take them up on that. You say, oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Hand on the chest is a very common gesture. Kheli mamnoon, merci. And then you just pay and you're on your way. So that's one of the things that happens. And then people will offer you stuff and they'll be very insistent. They're like, here, have some candy out of this jar. And you're like, no, I'm good, thank you. No, have it, it's really good. No, why don't you want it? And you just have to go back and forth. You just gotta be persistent. Like, I don't really eat sweets. No, I don't really want that. No, I don't really know what it is. Oh, my stomach's sensitive. I don't eat dairy. No, thank you. No, my mom just died. No, my glasses are dirty. No, my cat, I gotta wash my cat. Whatever you can come up with, you gotta come up with something because they'll just keep insisting until you're like at your wit's end. It's just the way it is. I mean, it's the culture. Nobody means any harm. So just always be, like understand that they'll be like, they'll make a face like, why doesn't he accept it? Why won't he take it? They won't be enemies with you. Don't worry. But yeah, people will offer you lots of tea and stuff like that. Eye contact is perfectly fine. Somebody will stare at you. Doesn't mean anything bad. If somebody comes up to you and starts talking to you and is really interested, especially if you look non-Persian, they're going to want to take photos with you and stuff. I've ran into some people who just like, they're at their wit's end. Like they're Asian or they're super white, blonde, and they're like, fuck, everybody wants to take a photo with me. I can't take it anymore. I just want to hide. That happens too. Now, there are people who are going to try to cheat you and lie to you. It's normal in any country, that happens. So if you're in a new situation and you just don't know how to navigate it, you can ask a local Persian person, like, hey, I'm about to go get a taxi. What do you think is a reasonable amount for me to pay, or what's the proper way of doing it? I've found that if anybody comes up to me offering me something, I'm usually going to get ripped off. I'm perfectly fine paying the tourist tax. That's what we call it, right? Tourist tax, getting a little bit of ripped off because somebody knows you don't know. But I've been here now for almost 2 months. I'm not gonna, I'm not a tourist. I'm like literally living here. So I think those things are important. When it comes to like speaking, I don't know what it is like to try to communicate. There's quite a few people who can understand English and they can get by. French is also spoken pretty well here. So you could, if you got some French, that can be helpful too. But you can speak English amongst each other, but people are going to ask you, where are you from? And then they're going to say, oh, how great is it to be in America? I'm like, oh man, it sucks being here. Those conversations can come up. And there's people who are like, oh man, it must suck to be living in America. Iran is great. But if you speak English, you're going to invite some of that in. So just letting you know that's the case. All right, next topic. I want to mention this to you. If you are going to travel through Iran and just go all around, remember that when you get to a local place, if you take a taxi or a Snap or Maxim, talk to the driver, really get to know them, ask as many questions as you want, as long as they're not too personal. My wife always says, I ask way too many personal questions, and I do, but nobody gets mad. I feel like I do it in a way that they don't seem to get upset. They're continuing the conversation. But she's like, hey, you don't know. Maybe they're just doing it because they feel like they should. So that's a valid point. But talk to them, because they might actually tell you like, hey, if you're planning on going to this region, I'll come with you for the next 3 days. I'll just travel with you. And the way that works, they kind of call it a leader, not English leader. It's just a Farsi word called leader, lider. And so this person will come with you the entire trip, their car, and they are available to. You don't have to hang out with them 24/7 if you don't want to. They can take you to the bazaar, drop you off, come back in 2 hours, come back in 3 hours. Then they will be responsible to find the cafes that you like, a hotel stay that you like. They'll take all of that on, especially if they've had some experience doing it. What's nice about that is you'll really get the local feel, especially if that person knows the place pretty well, and you'll save a lot on, paying the tourist tax, as they say. There's no such thing as a tourist tax, by the way. I'm talking about like gringo tax, So yeah, you can negotiate prices any way you want. You can say, well, how much do you want for the day? And they might say, like for us, we paid somewhere around, I think like 200,000, 300,000 for the day. Some people say, oh, you got to pay like 500,000 toman for the day for it to be worth like $10 a day or so. Negotiate, find what you like. And there are people who are going to tell you absurd numbers, and there are going to be people who are going to give you very fair numbers. And then there's people who are going to taroff, and that's really difficult because they're going to say, pay whatever you want, pay whatever you want. Don't do that, because if you're going to negotiate at the end, it's going to be a nightmare. It kind of happened to us. The guy wouldn't take our money, and he's like, no, that's too much, and all this stuff. So in the beginning, just say, hey, let's just come up with a fair price, and we'll go from there. When it comes to staying, you can buy their hotel for them for the night. You can buy a cheaper hotel for them for the night, but many times they'll just figure out their own booking. Some will sleep in the car, whatever they want to do. Okay, next, you're going to come here and you're going to want to buy some stuff and things. Fortunately, luggage is very cheap. You can buy like a China-made luggage and put all your stuff in it and ship it back. But remember that if you leave here, so for example, if you leave on like a good airline like Turkish Airways or Emirates, yeah, they might give you 2 luggages per person and it's covered, but it's very expensive. But if you fly on if you want to get out of here and go, like let's say to Azerbaijan, or if you want to, to Azerbaijan, or if you want to go to Turkey and you're going to take a low budget airline, well, they're going to give you 1 luggage, and the extra luggage is going to cost you $250. So consider that when calculating your luggage allowance. And if you're going to travel afterwards, now you have like 2 or 3 large luggages to haul around. The local budget airlines or even local airlines, they're going to charge you quite a lot per extra luggage. Shipping it is a nightmare. Shipping is very expensive. You can expect around $300 to $500 to ship a luggage from here, Iran, to anywhere else that you want. People have said that if you can find shippers that'll do it for like as high as 150, I couldn't find anyone. I asked around, I looked, I couldn't find it. If you are going to take larger things, yes, there are freight companies that will say, look, we already got this one container and there's room in it. So we're going to charge you per kilo or per size, and we're going to put this other items in there and you can ship it. There are ways to do that. You got to ask around. I don't have any leads on that. There are local flights here that are ridiculously cheap. So 20, 30 bucks. You can go anywhere. There's tons of airports here. Again, gas is cheap. So there's a lot of local flights. Right now, as I'm recording this, November 1st, 2024, there are still no local flights because of the Israel and Iran thing. I think they're starting back up. So there's no local flights, but it's expected that November 5th, flights are going to resume, but that can happen too. Fortunately, if you ever need an escape plan, which is kind of our next topic, if you are in a country like this where things are sometimes unpredictable, you can always reserve a car on Maxim or just go up to anyone and say, hey man, will you drive me? Go up to a taxi driver and say, hey, I need to go to the border tonight, tomorrow. And they will drive you 14 hours, 24 hours. From Tehran, I think it's about 12 hours to go to Azerbaijan, like Baku. And I think it's about 20 hours or even less to go to Turkmenistan, or is it Armenia, I think? And then it's about 24 hours to get to Turkey, to the Turkey border or Iraqi border. And from there, then you can kind of travel and go to the next leg of your trip. But consider that, right? You take a bus, you can take a There's local trains, which we didn't take on this trip. And then there's local cars that you can just rent. So don't freak out too much. This is pretty normal at these things. Food, ordering, cafes, restaurant, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. When you go to any place, most of the time you just go sit down where you want. Some of the nicer restaurants and hotels, and cafes are going to say like, hey, you got to ask the wait staff, the host to seat you, which is fine. And then they'll bring you a menu. There's a QR code that you usually scan. If you don't understand it, a lot of times they'll translate for you. And yeah, it's pretty much, that's it. There's no tips. You don't have to worry about tips. The nicer restaurants, the bigger restaurants, the table will have a number. So once you go eat, when you finish, you leave and you tell the cashier which table you were at. They will print you a receipt. Is everything correct? And then you pay the money with your card and you go. And the card, the way that works is you have a PIN, right? But you give them the PIN. So that's usually the way it works. Don't freak out. The card that you have, you give them the PIN. Usually you hide your PIN. Here it's the other way. You give them the PIN. And I don't know, people ask a lot about like, should you come in with cash? I did. I brought about $5,000 US with me just to have. And I think that was actually pretty good. And for about 3 months, that's a pretty reasonable amount of money. For two of us, we probably didn't even go through half of that. Yeah, I think we didn't even go through half of that for 3 months staying here. But again, we did have some free stays. We had family, so we stay in a beautiful apartment here in Tehran, in Nomad, which is a very nice neighborhood. And then before that, in a different neighborhood. But even if we did stay in kind of like a longer term apartment, it wouldn't be crazy. It still wouldn't like break our bank, but it's not all that cheap either. So consider how much cash you bring, but I think $5,000 for two people for 3 months should be perfectly fine. And we discussed cell phones. You can buy anything you need here, laptops and stuff you can buy. Again, a little bit more expensive sometimes. So consider that. And food, grocery stores, plenty abound, cafes and little places you can go pick up stuff, sandwiches to go. All of that is there. Anyway, that's it. I think it's gotten pretty long, but it's a good kind of primer on how to get around the country, how to get into the country. The exit we haven't done, but from what we understand, it's pretty straightforward. You go to the airport, get there 3 hours early, take your luggage, one line, everybody checks in their bag, and then you go through security, and then you go through customs. And the reason they say come 3 hours, because sometimes it can be pretty packed. And the main thing to consider is how much time you need to get to the airport. A lot of flights usually leave at night, and that can make it a little bit easier to get to the airport. And then in your connection, that's another thing to be careful of. Our next leg of the trip is going to be to go to Italy. And so we needed enough time between the connection. The first flight was only going to be 2 hours. I'm like, no, there's no way we're going to make a connection in 2 hours, especially if the first leg of the trip is delayed. So I usually like 3 to 4 hours for places like this. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Check out CIP, which is like a VIP for exiting. It's supposed to be pretty cool. We might try it. I don't know how expensive it is, but they put you in a lounge and then they take your luggage for you. So it can kind of help make things a little smoother, but of course you pay for that. And of course we'll have a good driver take us to the airport. Nice car, we'll pay them. Life is easy. And that's it. All right, guys, take care.